Hello, everybody. Thanks for inviting me, Dialogue and your team. And thanks for everybody who's here listening to this monologue. I hope I can keep it for 10 minutes. I haven't tried it out. When sage Markandeya, who's a rishi, was having a conversation with King Vajra, who's a descendant of Krishna, and King Vajra asks Markandeya that, give me some formula by which I can be having a life of joy and fulfillment, both this life and for the next life. To this, sage Markandeya replies that for that you need to have some sort of a passion, some sort of an abiding interest. And to have that, you need to have some sort of a physical form. You have to create something yourself. And it has to be a physical form which can connect your imaginary thoughts and ideas. So you need something that connects it. And for that, you need a physical form or an idol, what we call a pratima. And that, for that to be beautiful, to hold your attention, you have to understand pratima lakshanas, or you have to understand sculpture. And to understand sculpture, you need to understand how to represent a three-dimension in a two-dimensional way. And so you need to understand painting. So you need to understand the Chitra Sutras. And to understand painting, you need to understand the human body and how to represent it, its balance, its grace, its movement. And for that, you need to understand Natya Shastra, you need to understand emotions, you need to understand Nritya Shastra. So, and for that, you need to understand music and things like that. So by the end of it, King Vajra realizes that what Markandeya is talking about is actually synergy, that everything is connected, and that to understand one thing, you need to know the other. And by the end of it, the other thing that Markandeya is alluding to is that you will already have a life of passion and fulfillment because you would have gathered all these skills through the end of this process. So, but for me, the main thing is that to create anything, you need to have sort of a technical training and you need to create skills for yourself. So that's my learning too from this. How does this pan out in our lives? Take me, for example. I've been through this regular rite of passage that everybody has after school, cramping for admissions in college. And when I got into architecture, the usual comments came flowing in from well-meaning family members, uncles and all. Oh, she's a girl, she can draw, she can paint, she can stay at home and work. So it's a good thing for her. I mean, it's stereotyping women, of course, but also it's stereotyping the profession. But it came from a good place, so I was not bothered by that. As a teenager, I had many interests, some my own, and some were thrust upon me because I was a girl, and some, like music, were mandatory because coming from a typical South Indian family, one had to go through the rigor. And it was a few of these skills that I used later in my work and in my profession. This is my studio now. And that strange contraption in plastic with two triangles, that's the parallel and those are the set squares. I still use that. Many of you, the younger generation, may have just bypassed this whole process. And this is my tailoring studio. I always made my own clothes. And the sewing machine, that icon of domesticity, was always in my study. Hanging around with my mother, I picked up the basics. And although it was considered quite plebeian, ordinary, fortunately, I didn't run away from it. So, is there anything common between this housewife's hobby and architecture? without my realizing it, this became a stepping stone for me. Since I knew fabric, understanding drape and fall came easily to me. And I understood crafts and tradition, so I understood history. I understood the human form, so I understood development of surfaces. When you think of it, it's quite crazy, isn't it, that a flat two-dimensional piece of fabric can wrap around this complex biological form of ours and fit perfectly without any wrinkles and allow for movement. So it's quite fascinating, according to me, parametric design, actually, if you will. I learned that there was a relationship between material and cuts, hand-woven fabric and natural fibers, which was the norm those days. There was no machines, they were hand-woven, the yarn was hand-spun, and dyed vegetable dyes were used. And it was hard work, and so fabric needed to be conserved. And hence these traditional straight cut that you see on the left of a Kalidar Lucknow kurta, where not even a piece of fabric was wasted. And everything was a straight line or diagonal lines, a rectangle or a triangle. So every piece was conserved. And this, I noticed, was the case in any ancient culture, the kimono or the Arabic jalaba or the disdasha or something that they call, that they wear in Arabic nations. All of them, the basic cut is the same. It's just the sizes vary, and how loose it is, it varies. So one learns to respect material. But whereas the cut on the right that you can see came after mill looms were introduced, and then it was not so important to conserve fabric. And it's the same with architecture. Once you have plywood and laminates, it's okay. You don't have to worry like if you were using natural materials like teak wood. The structural design of clothes. Just like our buildings, clothes have stress and strain points too. Wear and tear is caused by moving arms and legs. And these stress areas need reinforcement, whether it's under the armhole or at the slit where your kurta's sides meet. All these are stress points, and you can see here how it's reinforced with that blue fabric, just to give you an idea. And contrasting material, you can choose to express that junction, or you can just choose to blend it, just like you would express a hinge or a dovetail joint. You could do that with fabric too. Sometimes you would use fabric in bias, so there's a little give, there's a play, and it allows you to stretch. The lapels of your shirt, where you button up, or your cuffs, all have extra layers of fabric. These are all details that keep it firm and strong. So I realized that it's not devil, but design that is there in the details too. Quilting, it's an age-old art, a craft actually. And whether it's the patchwork quilt of a typical Midwestern country home in America, or the kantha of West Bengal, or the kaudi, I think, in North Karnataka, all these are what do you do with extra material. They repurpose it very effectively and very aesthetically. And it could also be in architecture. Wherever there is marble, there is mosaic. Whether it is in Italy or in Rajasthan, the terrazzo flooring in your Milan airport, or the DDA flats that you see in Delhi, built in the 70s, mosaic flooring. So what do you do with the waste pieces? Use it effectively. Drawing, measuring, and pattern making led me further later on to sketching. And sketching, not particularly as a profession, I was far away from that, far away from that, but more as a skill to study and to observe and to unravel why a thing is done in a particular way. And why is drawing so crucial to architecture? Because you have this easily accessible two-dimensional medium to express something or to document something which is in 3 dimensions. So I feel quick sketching is a very useful trick to have. And if you don't have digital means, then this is a really useful and ubiquitous piece of skill that you could have. It's to study form or contours, to even study intangibles like character, movement, and mood, or of a person, of a space. Here are some examples. I'll just quickly take you through a few of my sketches and then move on to architecture. Observe the character of these two people here. The wizened old man with the keen eye out for customers on the left, and the other is a young Italian impresario. One is sitting a bit hunched up and tense, looking out for a customer, hoping he meets his expenses. And the other, although rather short, he makes up for it by his laid back, by his attitude, leaning back with an erect body language. Just their body language is a clue. It's not hard to tell the character here of this little girl, you know, a little defiant, not your typical girl into dolls, frills, frocks, etc. And she grows, and after several years into this teenager, but the same character comes through. The carefully careless hair, grunge-like, a jacket thrown on, and not that meticulous, manicured little lady. So from people to other life forms, it's always very complex to draw biological forms, especially zoological ones. And because of their continuously changing contours, form here, for example, is dominated by this huge abdomen. I mean, I was at a time very fascinated by cows. And it's held by this, you know, skeletal structure here of this cow. And as you can see, the muscles are hung from those hip bones. Here, animals again, and but with a little difference, because it's the very nature of an animal like a donkey, which doesn't respond to stimulus or any eye contact, comes through, where a donkey is facing a dead wall or each other. So I was quite fascinated in this trip through Idra. And then also that intangible of that huge ship, the power of that entire huge ship on a dynamic surface like water, but it's held together by that anchor. The tautness of that anchor just expresses tension so well for me. Contrasts, this is just a study in how that jharoka is framing and bringing out the contrast. And that little chhatri that you can see shows how in a climate like this, you know, something that pierces the sky in a terrace, shows how life can happen in a terrace, unlike anywhere in the south. It's not so common. Or the other idea of contrast could be how this entire foliage is taking over the build structure, which is quite secondary. Spaces for people, made by people. The one on the left is clearly a very formal space, Piazza San Marco, which you can see through this arch. It's lined by this very formal buildings all around, a colonnade, and then a cathedral on one side with the campanile. And you know, there is a focus on the cathedral, and it's a very ceremonial space for people. Whereas the one on the right is just incidental, carved out by passage, you know, by usage, and more personalized at a very human scale. So there is a certain character to that. And here, for example, there's a little synagogue in Jewtown, Cochin, a little space out there for people to enter before you enter the synagogue, or the junction in, commercial sort of a junction in street crossing in Milan, how that contrasts so much with that huge sort of impersonal meeting space in Tiananmen Square in Beijing, where you are just, you're a fleck in that huge crowd and you just do not have a voice in a government or in a politics like that. After, spaces are one thing, but entire cities can have character too. The one on the left is, for me, it's kind of fun to, when you travel, to capture something which just has a couple of elements which are a clue to the entire city. For example, the picture on the left for me, just captures any city in Germany, but this is in Berlin in particular, where the 3x3 stones, pavers, are used throughout in Germany, in all the cities. And they're so clever, they're embedded in sand. There is no concrete. It's not permanent. You can just pull it out if you like. But they're tightly embedded in sand, held together by coping all over, border stones. And they take over anything that is placed in the pavement, whether it's a water fountain or a tree guard, or a hatch for utilities below, and they take on the shape of the contours. So it's the most brilliant little thing that they have invented, I think, in Germany. And any clues which the city on the right could be, the varying brickwork that you can see on the walls, and the paving, and the road, the potatoes, the bicycle, all these are clues. Amsterdam, yeah. So it's very, I mean, something that captures, a couple of things that can capture an entire city is a game that one could play with. This is, you know, I've always felt that towers are a statement. They're a statement of power, of politics, or in any civilization, ancient or even today, whether it's the Gopurams of the Pallavas, or the Vimanas of the Chola Empire, or the Qutub Minar of Delhi, the political history of any place is played out here. For example, in Germany, in Berlin, there is this cathedral tower, which was once the symbol of power, quickly taken over by the national symbol of communist power of GDR, you know, the TV tower in Alexanderplatz in Berlin. So we began this talk with sketching and drawing what we saw, whatever we observed, and naturally what we liked. But now let's move further and see how we can use this to create something that we want to see, and which is what architecture is, that something that we create and we want to see. Starting with, in a project here, drawing what exists. I mean, very faithfully and very carefully capturing what exists in a site. This is a project that we did for a school in the outskirts of Bangalore, a very wooded site and a lot of contours, very steep contours, as you can see here. And the amphitheater existed. So we had to really carefully document exactly how the slopes were there and how that wooded site, indigenous trees, all of them were there in the site. And before we jumped to creating anything, it was very important to actually document it and then slowly move on to the ideas that we wanted to explore. The project is called the Art Village in Valley School of Bangalore, and we felt that the empty space is at least as important as everything around it. So we thought the courts would be a very important learning point for children. So we had courts on the left, on the right side of the amphitheater along the contours, and the courts on the left was against the contours. So we created different kind of feeling in the courts here. And we used, the school was crowd-funded by the parents of the school, whatever donations that they gave. So we had a very tight corpus. And so we decided on a simple 6-meter module with a truss. So we used no structural engineer and locally available labor, and that helped keep the costs down. I have a confession. I do not use AutoCAD, at least not for this project. No AutoCAD was used. And also it helped with the budget. We couldn't, it was a pro bono job, and we had to use very limited resources within our office also. And as in tailoring, drawing is the same, dimensioning is the same. Sizing and proportioning is important for decision making in design. So, and to romanticize this idea, because it was called the Art Village and for the specific arts program that the school offered, so, and to romanticize this idea of art, this project was executed almost entirely with hand-drawn working drawings. And the building sits gently along the existing contours, embedding itself into the profile of the slope. There was no retention, no cutting of land or trees. And again, this helped keep the costs down. We used only terracotta and granite, which was mostly terracotta, table molded bricks, not even wire cut bricks, terracotta roof, Mangalore tiles, and granite, which is locally available, but very expensive as far as labor is concerned. So we just used it as trims, as you would with expensive material in any clothes that you design. So it was used only as a, as a trim, and, only the horizontals as a datum or as a reference point were used with granite, and the slope of the land could be highlighted by how the height varies with reference to that horizontal line there. Drawings were made to pin the building to the ground, and trees had to be framed and or skirted, so it was very important to measure all the trees, and we used a simple triangulation technique in the site. We didn't hire a surveyor, but we went and measured the triangles between each tree, so that was the best way to root the tree onto the ground. We devised these simple devices, creating courts of various shapes and sizes. The built volumes of pavilions alternate with sequences of courts and open-to-sky classrooms. We used, like I said, materials of the earth. I'd be lying if I said that those trees and slopes didn't challenge us. It certainly did, but we embraced those features. Tied in with this idea of the holistic experience. Some of the details that we have of those figures over there were done by the art teacher from Shantiniketan. Steep drop, the building almost disappears. These are some of the pictures of the site. This is a house that we did in a very modest neighborhood of Bangalore called Jayanagar. And it's generous plots, generous roads, but the buildings were very, very modest with simple materials. It was developed in the 1970s, pretty old, and most of the houses were built by Karnataka Housing Board, and so it was a very, no fancy materials. And the client had bought a piece of land here and wanted to build something which is very self-effacing, very introverted clients. So we didn't want to scream out to the neighborhood. Here, the privacy was valued by the client. So you can see the front of the building is separated from the back of the building by the court. And the court enters into the building also. And the landscape was given as much importance as the interiors of the house. Very basic, simple ideas were used. Some of the old details like the Art Deco compound walls were brought inside the house to extend the idea of a court. Some materials that were used. Now, my journey into this firm has always been a bit conflicted, because mainly my OCD or love for details, kind of to reconcile that with my firm's pursuit of large-scale projects has always been a bit difficult for me. But I pursued nevertheless. And all these large apartment complexes are one of the areas that I got interested in, because for that you need to understand the collective aspirations of the people who are going to live there. The builder is not really the one who's going to use the space, so you'll need to understand whom he's selling it to. And the client might just give you a cryptic sort of a description of what he wants, and you've got to read between the lines. And so these initial sketches for a clubhouse for a project in the south of Bangalore was how the numbers were also tied down, and the idea was also tied down. We had to work with very with complicated statutory bylaws and land extensions and buffer zones and a lot of things like that. So you can see, I don't know if you can see properly, but the FSI is also scribbled everywhere. Everything that you make a change for, you keep an idea of the numbers. Those apartments take care of all the FSI. The number crunching happens in the background. And I got to do the programmatically a little challenging part of the clubhouse in a very contoured site. So matching the client's aspirations with the design intent always is a creative challenge. This is called a Sterling Terraces in the south of Bangalore. We are a boutique firm, but a large boutique firm. And so Ours is a design-driven business. Unlike many firms which are there in India, which are kind of large firms, they're mostly business-driven businesses, but ours is a design-driven business firm, so it's always a bit of a challenge. This is for a project that we did in one of the largest mixed-use development projects in the south of Bangalore called Prestige Falcon City. The master planning was thought out. The genesis is always a hand-drawn sketch, and how it transforms over time. And you cannot get attached to a single idea in a project as large as this. It morphs over time. Land packets are bought, they are sold, and then lots of other factors come into play, and you ditch and you recreate, and finally the final design came through. What began as on the right, as you can see, a continuous towers of 30 floors. We thought that would be like a fortress and it wouldn't be a good idea. And therefore, later we had these individual towers. This is how it looks now with time. And that's the clubhouse. So my learning from this journey so far is that architecture and design should drive you, sure, but it's with process and sound business principles that you will be allowed to build with scale. Thank you. An architect starts with the intangible, makes it tangible, and if they are any good, the result is finally intangible again. Purnamadam Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnanadhaya Purnameva Avashishyate. What remains is again full. Thank you.